My name is Marco Kuiper. You can find me on Twitter and on GitHub and other places under the tag Marcofolio. And like I said, I'm from the Netherlands and work for a company called Info Support. We do have a location here in Belgium. It's up in Mechelen. And I work with colleagues from Belgium as well over there. But they tend to speak the Dutch language as well. So that's where I found this conference very interesting. Doing my day job, like I said over here, I'm a developer. I like to develop applications for smartphones, so I build apps. Who else here in this room builds applications on the smartphone? Okay, it's good to hear. There's a lot of people. Nice that you are attending this session today. Who of you guys are building those applications with Xamarin? So that's a lot, I think 50% of those people that just put their hands on the air. For those of you that aren't building their applications today with Xamarin, I'll just give you a quick run through on what it is. But for those of you that are not building applications with Xamarin, everything that you will see today can easily be done with all the native stuff or even with the JavaScript stuff that you usually use to build applications. So it doesn't mean that everything that I will show you today has to be done with Xamarin, but just know that the code samples that I'll be showing today will be using C# as a language, meaning that Xamarin will be the technology stack behind it. So like I said, a little bit about Xamarin. Xamarin is a native way to build applications for the smartphone, so either for iOS, Windows Phone, or even Android. And it will allow you to write your code base in only one language, naming C#. So for those of you that are still building Windows Phone applications, you still can, using the same C# code base. But using that same code, you can also build applications for iOS and Android, but still having the native look and feel, the native performance of applications that you would usually build using, for example, Swift or Java or anything like that. I can do like a whole different talk about Xamarin, but just as a little reference, this is what Xamarin does and what it can mean for you. Last year, I think it was last year, Xamarin was still a separate company, but it was brought into the Microsoft ecosystem. Microsoft bought the company. So now when you start a Visual Studio and everything, you will get Xamarin with that. So you can just play around and build your applications for iOS and for Android using a language that you like, in this case, C#. Also, what I'm doing during my day job is working for the Dutch railways. So over here you see it's a grayed out picture, but it's a picture of one of the trains running in the Netherlands right now. So there's a railway station right next to here. Who came with the train today? No one. Oh, there are 1-2 people coming out of the train. Awesome. So that's good. So up in the Netherlands, a lot of people are using the train daily to get to work, get to school, and get everything done. So the infrastructure of the Dutch railways is really, really important to get everything working and up and running. As you can imagine, that there are 16 million people living in the Netherlands, and 9 million of them are actually using the railway station or the train on a yearly basis. So it's a really big part of our infrastructure, making sure that the trains have to run on time in order to get everything up and running. The thing is that the people that are running those trains actually have this device called a rail pocket. And it's a real rugged, old, slow device, still running on Windows Mobile pre-100 years ago, something like that. And it makes the work hard for those people. So the conductor and also the train driver uses this device to do its work. And as you can see on the picture, it's just an old device and you don't want to work with that. So for that, we are working together with the Dutch Railways in order to make the successor of this rail pocket. And that is actually the device that we use, that we build the apps for. So today I'm going to take you on a little journey on how we are building these applications, and especially because of the high impact of these applications. If they don't work, the trains in the Netherlands will stop working as well. So as you can imagine, that's a huge impact on society, on the infrastructure. So we have to make sure that the applications that we're building on these phones have to work properly. Let's see. So all the functionality that was originally stored on the original rail pocket. We transferred them and we ported them to 8 several smaller applications, each with an individual part of functionality that it serves. So we can have like some applications only be separated out for the railway conductor, the other one only for the driver, making sure that each functionality has been split into a group of applications, making sure that we can distribute them easily. Everything is on Android right now. As you can imagine that even though we're using Xamarin, we can use iOS as well, or even Windows Phone. We wanted to have a focus on the Android platform first. And for those of you that are common with the Dutch railways will recognize the colors. The colors of the Dutch railways are blue and yellow. That's why we're also building the applications to have the real look and feel from the Dutch railways. So these are actually screenshots from the apps that we're building together with the Dutch railways in order to get the trains up and running. And for example, one of the funniest thing, or one that I really like the most, is the one in the middle. It's in Dutch, I understand that. But when you get to a railway station, you'll get like a message in the trains from the conductor saying, okay, welcome to, for example, Utrecht. You can get another train leaving from that railway station at that time. So it will help all the people making sure that they will get on time. Like I said, all of these applications are really crucial to get the work from the Dutch railways off the ground and making sure that everything in the infrastructure of the Netherlands works properly. We'll be doing that with a typical project. A typical project consists of like different islands where you have, when you're doing stuff like Scrum, you have like a product owner, those are the one that is really close to the business. You have a couple of developers. Those are the ones that actually are building the software and are writing it. And typically on the bottom you see also something like Q&A, the testers. Who recognizes this pattern? Who has like a project doing like something like this? Yeah, good. So that's a lot of people recognizing these kind of groups of people that are doing a project in order to get something done. It's really common. And the problem is that these, like I draw them in this picture as well, these are really small islands where people are like having their own kind of mindset and their own kind of box, thinking that they know what they are going to do. So on the top we have the product owner, the one that's from the business. They usually tend to talk in use cases. I don't know if anyone have seen those use cases, those lengthy Word documents with a lot of just rules and what if this happens, this will happen as well, and this will. It's really messy. But that's the kind of thing that the business does understand, and that's why someone like the product owner is actually using those kind of techniques to write down their specifications. On the other part, on the bottom, we see the developers. The developers usually write unit tests. That's their way of saying this is the truth. It's their way to show from, okay, the functionality that has been described, we write the code, we write unit tests, and we test that on the lowest functionality to make sure that that piece of code actually does work. So that's their truth. But on the other hand, we have Q&A, the testers. And those testers, they tend to look further than the unit test, and they tend to look to like scenarios. So it's from front to back testing and back again, making sure that everything is covered. It's like an integration test. So the problem right now, what we see here is that there are 3 different kind of groups talking in a different language, but they still want the same functionality done. And that's really a big problem, because when not everybody is on the same page, how do you make sure that you are building the right thing? And that's why it's very important to have these 3 people talk to each other in a session that's called a 3 Amigos session. 3 Amigos are just friends that have like different views on actually the same thing. But with their powers combined, they can make sure that the right thing is being built. So the 3 Amigos is what we use in the project to make sure that it works as expected and that we build what we want. And how do we do that? We define features. I think a lot of you will define features from a specific application or a project, and we write those down. and we write them down in actually a file called a feature file. It just has an extension called .feature, and within that feature, we have specified different scenarios. So, for example, when you have a web page and you have a login feature, you have the feature or the functionality to log in on a web page. We have a login feature, and a scenario would be a user has successfully been logged in, or a user has been unsuccessfully logged in. With that feature, the three amigos sit together and they talk, and they have like a conversation. Okay, what do you as a business owner expect this feature to do? And what does the developer expect this feature to do? And by just using simple communication, people will have those different kind of views, those opinions all together, and just write them down inside a feature file, making sure that everybody is on the same page and the right thing is being built. I'll just show you some examples later. But the language that we're using to build up those feature files is called Gherkin. And like I said, when we had the three little islands, everybody was talking a different language. And we didn't want different languages to use, so we had to use Gherkin. Gherkin is a domain-specific language, and it makes it possible to have like a readable, sensible kind of way to have that open communication in a really basic way. And how it works is really simple. So you have Gherkin scenarios. Those are the ones that are included inside of a feature file. And it has three different steps. It's called a given, when, and then step. The given is a step where you set up your scenario, so the preconditions and everything that you have to do in order to make your start from the scenario. And when something else happens, so the trigger happens, then verify or test if it's actually working as expected. This is actually something that we know from unit testing as developers as well, but we call AAA. It's arrange, act, and assert. Those are the things that I usually write down when I write unit tests, AAA kind of driven development. But that's a really technical thing, and it's fun for us as developers because it starts with AAA. But for something like the business or the product owner, AAA is really a technical thing. So that's why we're using given, when, then with Gherkin. And this is like one of the examples that is really simple, and probably everybody will understand it. So I called it an acceptance-driven presentation. So let's see if this presentation will be accepted. So given a great presentation is presented, when the presentation is over, then the audience will clap. It's a really simple case that everybody will understand what will happen. But like I said, because this is so simple, when you put all those three amigos together, everybody will start talking, and for example, the tester will say, okay, but what if it's not a great presentation? And the developer will say, okay, but what if there's more than one audience? What will happen? And it's that conversation that actually builds up the specification. It's not one holy grail saying this is something you have to do. It's everybody working together in one common language that will help you get the product right. But one of the things is that that's really powerful is the Gherkin examples. Like I said, whenever the conversation between those three amigos will start, people will start having ideas, like what will happen if, and what will happen if something else happens. That is actually something that these examples for you can do as well. So in the example on the right, you see some placeholder, given a certain level of presentation is presented. And on the bottom, you'll see examples that will be different placeholders. So the examples, if a great session is presented, everybody will clap. If it's horrible, everybody will cry. Those are the things that people will come up with during those sessions called the Three Amigos. And it's really powerful to have the conversation going when it comes to examples. So, no, let's go back one slide back again. Like I said, this is just writing down your specifications in a Gherkin-style manner. You can have like some meta information as well, like some description, what does the feature do and what is it for. But eventually it comes down to writing the given, when, and then steps. The most powerful thing about this is that you have one common understanding of everybody knowing what the application or the feature will have to do. So get rid of all the Word documents and all the big lengthy ways of writing specifications, and just write it like this, and it will help you get that common understanding between those three little islands. The thing is that the examples will help you, but the best thing about Gherkin is that we can automate it. And that's the next step that we'll watch today. So when we talk about quality, we usually talk about testing the application, right? So testers, Q&A, quality assurance, that makes sure that the application works as intended. And with the Gherkin steps that we have, we can use that as an input to make sure that our application that we build on the mobile phone actually works. And when talking about testing, usually this kind of, the testing triangle from MyCone, you have 3 different layers of testing that you can make sure your automated tests run on. So on the bottom layer, we have the unit tests. There's a lot of them. They are pretty cheap to build and really easy to execute. And those are the kind of tests that the developers usually build when they're doing test-driven development and everything like that. So I assume everybody is writing those kind of tests. Who is not writing unit tests? Okay, good. So proud of you guys. Everybody's writing unit tests. That's a really good thing. So there are 2 other layers actually from this testing pyramid that tend to be forgotten or not built. So the top layer is the UI layer. You have different kind of UI layer testing frameworks that you can use to actually test your UI. For example, when doing HTML, Selenium driver is one of the most common ways to test the top layer of your testing pyramid. The service layer is the integration layer between different kind of components. That's what people tend to forget as well, but it makes continuous delivery really important to have automated tests on that level as well, making sure you don't break on component level your application. But for today, we're just going to focus on the UI layer, especially since we're talking about applications. So we'll just focus on the UI layer, but please do not forget that the other 2 layers as well. So when you leave this room, don't think that you don't need those service and unit tests as well. Just make sure that you only see the top layer, and we use it for something that we call smoke testing. So only the happy flow through the application, making sure everything is hit at least once, but not defining all the scenarios, because those are the kinds of things that we put in unit tests on a lower level. So in order to automate these tests, we're gonna need a couple of ingredients. The first one being Visual Studio, because I'm using Xamarin, and Visual Studio is accessible on the Mac as well. So I'll be running Visual Studio on Mac OS, and we're using SpecFlow. And SpecFlow is actually the C# runner in order to get the Gherkin language transferred or ported to the C# code in order to get everything working, making sure that there's a mapping made between the Gherkin file and the C# code. We'll be using NUnit as a test runner. I'll explain everything later when it's in the code. We'll need some source code or the APK file in order to get everything up and running. And we'll be using Xamarin UI test in order to click on a button, because actually we're starting a real application. We'll just click around and we'll see what happens, and that will be our UI test. There are some variations possible as well. Instead of Xamarin UI test, you can use Calabash for those guys that like Ruby and not C#. And SpecFlow has an alternative as well, the Cucumber, also for those that don't like C# but prefer some Ruby code. So when we have the input file from the Gherkin, we can use that as developers as input for our for our UI testing as well. We have some step definition scenarios, and a step definition is the first translation of your given when and then steps, and it will be injected into your C# code. So what you see over here is an attribute above a couple of methods with a certain regular expression, and this is the SpecFlow part of everything. And On top of that, you see the given, when, and then step, together with the regular expression that you would expect in order to map it to the Gherkin file that we had before, that we made with the 3 Amigos. And like I said here in the comments, we have a setup, a trigger, and a verify step, and we used it in order to check if our testing still works. Same goes with the examples. Now you have a regular expression passing on a parameter inside of the method, especially useful when you have like the different kind of scenario examples that we saw earlier. For example, you can verify if the expected input is the same as the expected output that we saw in the scenario before. I know this is a little bit high level, but I'll show you some code, and it will probably make a lot more sense than I'll show you right now. Like I said, the last part that we need is Xamarin UI tests, and that will allow us to, for example, when running the emulator on a phone, to scroll, to click, to tap, to wait for an element to exist, to make sure to fill in a certain form, to submit a button, and that's where a Xamarin UI test comes in. But like I said before, this does work on native applications built with Swift or anything like that as well. You just need a different kind of language on top of that. But for today, we're using Xamarin UI test. So when the calls come together, there are 3 layers that I'll be showing you today. The Gherkin layer is the domain-specific language. That's the one where the 3 Amigos sat together and making sure, okay, this is where we're going to build this sprint, and making sure that it will be automated and everything is working. Behind that, that's the step definition. Those are in C# or in Ruby. Like I said, even if you do only the Gherkin step, you can always decide to automate stuff later. Just make sure that the Gherkin layer is really powerful enough, because the 3 Amigos already sat together, and it helps a lot of the open communication. But with the Gherkin layer, we can create those step definitions in order to automate it. And the test runner is something that we need, Xamarin UI test and Calabash, in order to get everything up and running, making sure that it works. So that's enough talk. Let's just dive into code, and I'll show you something to give everything a little bit more sense. Okay, this one sticks. Can you still hear me? Okay, good. Okay, so what I have here, I have an Android emulator first running. So I had a little demo application built for this session. Next to programming, I actually like to bake stuff, actually cooking in general. But for this demo, I asked my girlfriend to tell me, okay, which kind of stuff do you like to eat? And she said, okay, I would really like red velvet cake. It's one of those delicious red chocolatey cakes. So I said, okay, good. I'll just build a little application around that, and we'll call it Red Velvet. And actually, the Red Velvet cake is a really, really simple application that shows you a shopping list. It's kind of like a to-do list. So over here, we have a shopping list with items that we need in order to make the Red Velvet cake. And there's a couple of items in there, like cocoa powder. But wait, there's ketchup. I don't think there's any ketchup in Red Velvet cake. Some oil, some sugar. And you see behind the lines there are some check marks. And the check marks are actually there for making sure that I place the item inside of my shopping cart. So this is like a real simple application where I can just add, I press the plus button, and I can enter a name. For example, I decided I need more chocolate, and save the item. And when I save the item, it's at the bottom, and I can open it, and I can say I have bought the item, and I can save it again. And now you have the green check mark behind it. It's a really simple application, just to show you this is an Android app running, and it shows you how it should work, how a shopping list should work. So heading back to, or heading over to Visual Studio, over here we have our solution, and I should switch you to code again. Over here we have our solution with, this is a typical Xamarin solution. So over here we have some shared code in C#. Over here we have the actual application running inside of Android. I'm not going to really dive into this kind of code because that would be a whole different kind of session telling you how Xamarin Android works. But just bear with me that this is just a normal, regular, native Android application running right now. But the most important part that I wanted to show you today is actually the test step. So the test step is actually a project that is now running in Visual Studio, and it has different kind of files over here that we can use as an input for how the application works. Like I said, we have different kind of features. The features that were composed by the 3 Amigos. And one of the features that we wanted to have inside of this application is add a shopping item. The feature is called add a shopping item, and it adds an item to your list. And behind that, below of that, you see the scenario describing only having add one shopping item. And over here, what we see over here is that this is the scenario that we would expect. So given I have items in my shopping list, and when I press add, so there's a button on top of that, and I enter the name, for example, red food coloring, because that's something that we missed on the list, and when I press save, then I should see red food coloring inside of my shopping list. It's a really, really basic demo, but just showing you what the given when and then steps can do for you. And this is something, like I said, it's really readable for the business as well. So you don't have to have unit tests that are not business readable, and also not the use cases that are not really readable for the developers. This is some kind of common ground that we can use in order to make sure everybody is on the same page. Over here we see the delete shopping item. Like I said, it was pretty weird to have like the 100 milliliters of ketchup inside of this list, and we're just gonna check if the deletion of that item actually works. And over here I see, then I should not see that item inside of my shopping list as well. Like I said in my slides before, you can have like different kind of scenarios inside a specific feature. Maybe you want to combine like the add and delete feature inside of one feature, like a modify shopping list feature. And in that we have like the adding and the deletion of the items. But that's completely up to you, what you think suits your project or your team. One of the interesting things is that what I said before as well is that we can have the different kind of scenarios inside of here as well. So over here we have something called a scenario outline, and that's the one that has different kind of examples. So when I press edit on a specific item and I press it as bought and I save the item, then I should see that item marked as a specific state inside of my shopping list. So over here we have some kind of examples that are interesting. For example, the plain flour will be checked as bought. The cocoa powder will be bought as well. The granulated sugar will be added as not bought. That's something that when running this one, the default example, is already checked up front. So we uncheck it, making sure that the not bought feature actually does work. But there's something interesting, and I just put it in there as a demo to make sure, to show you guys that it's working, that there's 400 grams of icing sugar here, and when I check the check mark, it should be marked as bought. But when looking at this one, we already see that the icing sugar has been bought, so I expect this scenario to actually fail. Because when I click that one and I say I haven't bought it, and I save it, the green check mark is gone, so this scenario will actually fail. Just showing you that it will help you get the quality of your application up and running, because it's this kind of conversation that will help you get the message over. So those are the kind of features that we'll be showing inside of this demo. And what we'll be using here as well is that we have the different kind of steps. And those are the step definitions that I told you about earlier in the slides. For example, we have here the add shopping item step. And this is the kind of steps that I showed you before. So here is the real representation of the C# code that we use from the feature file that will be translated to this when step. So this was the original feature. When I press add, that's one of the steps that we have defined inside of our feature file, will be actually mapped to this code. And that's what actually SpecFlow will be doing for us. If you really want to get into the technical details of this, is that behind the feature file, there's a so-called code behind file. The code behind file actually is the magic that's going on, that's being added by SpecFlow. And over here we have this different kind of NUnit test runners and everything like that with all the given, when, and then steps. This is something you don't need to look at, but it's something that you might want to know or remember when you really want to have like the in-depth details when it comes to scenario writing. But it eventually comes to this, and this is like the steps that we try to bind on those different kind of given, when, and then steps of the file, of the application. So when I press add, so whenever the SpecFlow runner comes across the when I press add text, it executes this method, and over here we see the app.tap, so the application taps the shopping list screen add shopping item button. That's something that I called a shopping item button. And making this possible, this is the Xamarin UI test that is doing this for us. So whenever I write down, I press add, the application will tap on the app shopping item button. And the same goes for all the things that are below over here. When I enter the name, so I'm entering a new item, the string name is coming in. That could be one of the examples that the 3 Amigos actually came up with. We wait for the item name to pop up, the entry screen. We clear the text if there's anything in it, and then we enter the text of the name that we saw in the example. So this is just one of the things that the step definitions can do for us. Obviously, I have different step definitions, the delete shopping item, and also the mark as bought steps. And over here, what we see is the parameter name that we are passing on from the example table that we saw in the feature file. And what we can see over here is one of the things that I might do in another session as well. We are querying the application. So over here, we query the app. Okay, can you find that item? And if you find that item inside of my list, can you tell me if it has a green check box behind it? It has a query language. It's a real long one, but it checks if the image renderer, so if it has the image renderer that's showing the green cross behind it, and if it's available over there, then we know that the item has been bought. And this is something that all developers should know. This is the assert, and that's where we verify if the verify step if it's correctly and expected. So what I'll be doing right now is I'll switch to my test run, and since I was just using NUnit, it's just as a usual unit test. So over here we see the unit test window, but it's actually not a unit test. It kind of is because it's generated, but we are actually executing it based on our feature file. I've run it before, so that's why we already have the colors of the execution. But over here we see the red velvet test features, and these are actually the features that I've written down inside of our feature file. So inside of our add shopping item feature, we had one item, add a shopping item. So I'll just run that, and you'll see how this test works. So I'll just have to move some stuff around. And let's see if I can make this bigger. I cannot. Let's make that one bigger. There. So what we'll do now is I'll just run this test, and what we'll be seeing right now is that the emulator the app will be removed, the app will be installed again, and without me doing anything, the button will be pressed. The entry fields will be searched for. The red food coloring, like I said, will be entered. And what you might have seen is that it scrolled down. It was really like searching through the list if the red food coloring was added. And as you can see now, my test result is green, meaning that the test actually succeeded. And it was expected because that's the whole scenario. So we don't have like, what unit testing usually does is test if it's successfully added to a database, test if we can retrieve the data. But now we have a full UI from the front, from the start of the application, pressing a button, entering some data, getting information back, and checking if it's valid. Obviously, I can do the same for the deletion. So we should have an end result where the ketchup would be removed from the list. And that's something that we can use to make sure that our application works. So now I press the delete button inside of my test, and magic happens. The ketchup is actually removed from the list. And that's one of the things that's really powerful. And like I said, the mark as bought feature actually has one step that I expected to fail. And we'll see what happens then. Because there are different kind of scenarios, 4 in total. You see all the examples in your unit test window as well. And the application will now run 4 times, entering some data, marking as or searching for some data, marking as bought or not, and making sure that everything works. So this is something that the Q&A will help in order to get them to do their work faster. There's no manual testing needed at all because everything has been automated. And the most powerful thing is that you know that it works and that you've built the thing correct, the correct thing, and it works as well. Because that's where you get the input from your product owner, making sure that everything is actually working. So your product owner, you talk to them, okay, so we have this mark as bought feature. What do you expect? What would you like to see? But right now, we have one test as expected. The mark as bought, the icing sugar, is actually failing because I put that failed unit test in there. And this will also help you get the conversation started as well. Meaning that if this breaks, it could be a technical issue, obviously, but you can also go back to your product owner and say, hey, you said this one should not fail, but it does, but it contradicts the other example that you also said. So that will help you get your conversation going, making sure that everything works as expected. And like I said over here, the expectation was true, but it was false. You can have like some more decent messages, some more better decent messages, making sure that the people will also understand what true and false is. That's a question. Yes. Oh. So as you can see, this is a really powerful way to automate all your tests, especially for Q&A, because Q&A at our project, those are the guys that are actually writing down those specifications, the first one, and triggering the 3 Amigos session. And it will help get everybody on the same page, making sure that you're building the right thing. Okay, so let's get back to our slides again. Let's take this away. So that's, like I said, that's pretty awesome. I mean, you don't have manual testing anymore. Everything can be done automated. But the real problem right now is that we are only running on a simulator. Simulators can be different than a real physical device. You don't want that, but it tends to happen. And it also, one of the bigger downsides is that this is only running locally. So even if I had a physical device, I can still just plug it in, let it run, and everything will work. And you think, okay, my application is running fine, and it works on this high-end device that I have. But when you are thinking about spreading your application to the public domain, so for example, the App Store or the Google Play Store, you don't have all the devices, unless you have really a lot of money, but you don't have all the devices just in your pocket. But you still want to make sure that the features that you're actually building, so for the application, still work for all those devices. And that's where something called Xamarin Test Cloud comes in. Xamarin Test Cloud is a test-based solution that has like thousands of devices that you can just remotely execute, and we'll be leveraging that power to make sure that our application is running on all the devices that we want it to be running on. So you can also go to your product owner and say, hey, our application doesn't work anymore on the Kindle 3 because the device is way too slow for our application. And if the product owner says something like, okay, but I still want to run it on the application, you know as a developer you have something to do. But making sure that you like hit 98% of the common market standard, that will be good enough for the product owner saying, okay, well, too bad for those Kindle users, we don't support it anymore. At least now you know that stuff does break on certain devices, and it will work on the majority of it. So for Test Cloud as well, I'll just run a demo. And for that, I'll just put this back again. We'll head back to our Visual Studio solution that we had over here, and make it bigger. Let's see if this now works. There. When we have like the test execution window over here, there's really only one step that I need to do. I can right-click here, and I can select Run in Test Cloud. And when I select that option, I get this window, and I only have to select the APK file. And I select Upload and Run, and now something really interesting will happen because we have conference Wi-Fi that will be tested, and it goes really fast this time. Nice. It was really fast, actually. So I'll just select a team. I have different kind of teams running over here, and this is the window that I wanted to show you. Over here we have, like I said, a couple of thousand devices that I can actually select. Those are physical devices, and what will happen is that my APK will be uploaded to those devices, and the features that I actually selected are the ones that will be executed. So I will make sure that the features will be working on these phones as well. So for example, I'll just, who has an Android phone? Okay, just call me a brand, and let's see if it's in here. The OnePlus. Let's see. So the OnePlus is over here. So I think the OnePlus 3 is already out for a couple of months or weeks at least. What? The 5 is already out, yeah. So I think the OnePlus, the newer models haven't been released, at least added to Test Cloud. But still, we can just select the OnePlus 2. It's an older model because it's still running Android. So let's select that one, and although I'm an iPhone user, I still like the Samsung phones, for example. And I'll just select the Samsung Galaxy S7. It's not the latest one, but let's just go with that one. So what I do now is I'll just select those two devices and I'll run it. And what will happen now is that the application will get validated inside of Test Cloud, checking if the APK is correct, checking if the unit tests are correct. And after a while, it will start executing those tests on those devices that we have selected. This will take a while. Even though obviously, because of physical devices, those devices need to be wiped and they have to install the application. And eventually, you have to execute the test simultaneously, similarly as the one that I did on the emulator. As you can see now, it is running on two devices, but when I open it, you won't see much because only have some basic information like the app size and everything. But maybe by the end of this presentation, this will be done. That's why I did the run on one device yesterday evening. It was 11:30 p.m., so it was a late night for me, but it worked. So let's just open up this solution, and what we have here is that we can see the add shopping item feature and delete shopping item feature and the mark as bought feature, just as we would expect from our Visual Studio solution. And we can even open that. And we even have screenshots of the device actually running those kind of tests, and with different kind of steps. So given I have items in my shopping list, when I press add and I enter the name and I press save, the list of the device will actually get mutated. So these are really screenshots from the device, making sure that the feature that we built inside of our application works on those devices that we selected. other than just knowing that it works, it also gives me some information about memory usage, so you can find some performance hit. You can even look up the device log, seeing all the information that the physical device is giving us when running the test run. And all of that information can help developers find bugs or making sure that everything works. For example, one of the easiest things is that this one works because I programmed it pretty solid. But sometimes when you forgot to scroll down and you have different screen resolutions, some buttons don't appear on the screen. And that's something that you know now, and you can use the screenshots for that. And it will help you making sure that all the application and the features actually work on all the devices. So Test Cloud is a really powerful way to see if your application works. Right now, I'll just leave this one running. But when we get to the end of the presentation, maybe it will be finished. So as you can imagine, Test Cloud, it does come with a price, but making sure your application works on all those devices can be really useful and powerful as well. So with that, I'm almost at the end of my presentation. I'll just wait if my the test run is complete. But I still wanted to give you some final thoughts before you leave this room and enjoy the lunch. Because like I said, we're doing this in production as well. And how we define things is that we're using Scrum. So we start off with an epic. It's one of the higher levels of Scrum development. Those will be split down into so-called stories or product backlog items. And with that product backlog item, before we even start developing, that's when the three Amigos sit together. So before we even start building, we want to make sure that we're building the correct thing. And that's where all the three Amigos sit together, making sure that everybody is on the same page. And once that is done, we have the feature files. And with the feature files, we're actually adding the sprint backlog items. So everybody making sure that we're building the right thing. And the sprint backlog items will also have the automation steps, making sure that the Q&A guys don't have any manual testing anymore. Everything is being automated and pushed to the cloud. Taking it even one step further, this is Visual Studio App Center. Also, this is supported by native development for Android and for iOS. Prior to last week, this was still called Visual Studio Mobile Center. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, something like that, Connect, a Microsoft event took place. And that's where Visual Studio App Center got launched. It was actually Visual Studio Mobile Center GA. And what it does, you can build, test, distribute crashes, analytics, and push notifications to your devices. And you can even integrate it into your continuous delivery workflow. How it looks like, it's this actually. So what I've done, I've had the Red Velvet application that I'm hosting on GitHub. I connected it with the App Center, and right here I have the build step, so I can actually build the application right from Visual Studio App Center, and I can also test it. And I can select several test runs. I haven't done this yet, but you can also have different device set. I select a new device set, and over here you see all the devices that are also running on Test Cloud, because it's actually the same project behind that. So what we can do here now is that you can have different kind of sets of rules. For every commit that I push to my GitHub repo, the automatic test will run on all the devices, making sure that your application still works on all the devices that you want it to work on. And it will have a front-to-back integration. You can just see this in your continuous delivery workflow, that if everything is green on all the devices, just give me an APK and push it to whatever app store, or give me an APK and push it to the tester, so they have the first beta round of testing. So yeah, when you really want to have the full front-to-back stack of testing and continuous delivery, just make sure you check out Visual Studio App Center as well. Okay, well, I think I've talked enough right now. I think it's your turn. You can look up on my website, it's marcofolio.net, to have like some background information about what we talked about today. Most importantly, just go to GitHub marcofolio/Red Velvet. That's the demo sample that I showed you today. I can imagine that the demo was a little bit quick right now, but when you look at the source code, just open it and run it inside of Visual Studio, and it will help you understand the concept of behavior-driven development and everything behind that. The last two links are actually Xamarin Test Cloud and Calabash for those of you that want to run in Ruby. But as you can imagine, just running your tests on all kind of devices inside of the cloud is really powerful and really useful, especially when quality of your applications is really that important. Especially when you have like a public application that's running inside of the public app stores. Click. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Like I said, it's a little, I still have 5 minutes left, but I think everybody is hungry because we had a slow start today. So I really want to thank you, everybody, for your time. I hope I managed to inspire or at least give you some information that you can take away from here. Don't hesitate to ask me any questions. You can either walk to me and ask them over here, or just hit me up at Twitter at Marcofolio. So once again, thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.